Kyle may try to one-up that tomorrow.
There you go.
We'll see. So yeah, just a reminder to do that. Also, let's see, I think there was one other thing. No, maybe that's the only reminders that I had. So we'll go ahead and get started on this. Oh, the other piece was questions. We don't have yellow cards, so I'm going to do a little bit of conversation with these guys, ask questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience, and then we'll have a mic on the floor for questions for you guys. So I'll let you'll do the best introductions for yourself. So we'll start on Adam and then just work the way down. If you guys could, brief introduction about you as a person, but then talk a little bit more about your company you're offering, because I'm sure a lot of attendees aren't familiar with you guys. So let's just do that, and then I've got some questions to kind of dig into. Take it away, Adam.
Adam Vincent. I'm the CEO of a company called ThreatConnect. Our product is called ThreatConnect. My background is I'm a computer scientist, and I hate when I hear about people wasting their time. And so I lucked into meeting some analysts about 4 years ago that told me about how they do their jobs, and it was frightening. And so I set out to build a platform that can make their jobs easier, and that became ThreatConnect. We're using the vernacular that people have been using this morning, we're a threat intelligence platform.
Matt Jonkman, I'm CTO of Emerging Threats, and Emerging Threats is an open source project back from the old days. Our primary thing was IDS rules for Snort, and now Suricata, and I'm also involved in Suricata, the Open Information Security Foundation, which built that on grants and industry involvement. The products we have that are relevant today, we have an IDS rule set for Suri and Snort, but we have IP and domain rep feeds in a lot of different categories and a lot of different things there, and we have a query portal that gives context.
That's similar to the, I had the slide where I talked about the Open DNS portal, similar thing there.
So Adam Meyer, the other Adam, the Chief Security Strategist for SurfWatch Labs. SurfWatch Labs is a cyber risk intelligence company. So we complement a lot of the other threat providers, and we're really looking at supporting the C-suite. So we take 40-some million events a day, and we crunch it down to something digestible for a lot of strategic reasons. So we're definitely looking at more of that risk, kind of giving you outside view as you complement your internal view with your internal SOC type sensors and other feeds. Before that, I was a CISO for large critical infrastructure. So did quite a bit around the industrial environment, emergency management, law enforcement side of the house. And prior to that, I was Director of Information Assurance for Naval Air Systems Command. So a lot of DoD type of things. It's always interesting sitting in a room with DISA and NSA and Cybercom all at the same time. Anybody had those kind of meetings? It's always really, really fun. So that's me in a nutshell.
Cool. And my name is Mark Kendrick. I'm from DomainTools. We are a provider of cybersecurity intelligence information, as well as tools to investigate things around domain names, IP addresses, and the things that connect them together. I had the privilege of basically growing up with the internet. My first connection to the internet was about a 1200 baud modem, so I feel like that sometimes every time I'm on Boingo trying to refresh the Super Bowl score, but that's another problem. And so I've had the privilege of really watching the net evolve, first as being sort of kind of a geeky sort of a thing, to then becoming a platform on which very serious business was conducted, and now most recently on which very serious threats are launched. And it has provided a very interesting perspective. I have been with DomainTools now for over 7 years. My perspective when I first started with the company was really on the focus that the company had at the time, just on traffic and on people buying and selling domain names. But even then, there were a few people lurking in the shadows of our accounts that were doing very real investigations. And over the last few years, we've made a concerted effort of reaching out to those people to learn more about what it is that they're doing. I go in ostensibly to do training and end up leaving from there smarter than I came in. I think receiving more than I'm giving. And now then most recently, focusing very squarely on the challenges of enterprise security and helping people respond appropriately to the kinds of threats that they're seeing around domains, IPs, and again, the ways in which they're connected.
Okay, thanks for the quick intro. You don't have to answer this question in the audience. I'm curious how many people might be using any of these guys out here, just to see what the audience is like. So I'll just ThreatConnect customers in the audience. So a few hands. Emerging threats. Few hands. DomainTools.
Yeah.
Looks like DomainTools has got the lead. SurfWatch. Okay, so one of the things as an analyst, and I'm always talking to, in fact, we were talking about it at lunch, I kind of get overwhelmed by vendors and trying to understand what they do. So one of the questions I always like to ask when I'm talking to a new company, either new to me or they're an actual startup, is use cases. So we talked a little bit about in the introduction. I don't know, maybe Matt, start off. What are some of maybe the top 2 use cases that an analyst here in the room would use you guys for?
Our tools in particular are incident response oriented. I mean, you can use some of our rep data for blocking up front, but everybody knows there's risk there and nobody's false positive free. So I think we're most valuable for SIM correlation and then the response. You can go down through and query 4 or 5 years history on an IP domain, what other domains it's had related to it, what other IPs that domain is pointed to, malware samples that have been involved in it, and then in our case, intrusion detection hits as well. So you can get down to, all right, I had a hit on my firewall logs or IDS logs. I can go somewhere else and say, other people have seen that too. Mine is likely a true positive. Or that's an IP that's been cleaned for 5 years. And my hit to it either is an anomaly or a false positive.
Okay.
So it's a quick response tool.
This Adam.
So I think Ryan teed up the threat intelligence platform use case very well earlier today. The only thing I would stress that he said is it has to be vendor neutral. There are threat intelligence is something that everyone's talking about. It's being added to every product you buy these days, but being able to see your needs through the noise is going to be very difficult. So the ability to see an aggregate process of bringing data in from a variety of sources, not overwhelming your analysts, getting it into an analytic process, and then ultimately disseminating it across the organization. The only thing that I would add to what Ryan talked about earlier, and I talked to him afterward, and he said he pulled this slide because he didn't want to have too long of a presentation, is the feedback loop. So once you start brokering information and disseminating threat intel across your network, you need to be able to see what's happening. And so a threat intelligence platform needs to seek that feedback so that you can make better decisions about what intel has what value to your organization.
Next, Adam.
All right, thanks. So with SurfWatch, what we do is we don't really concentrate so much on the machine-to-machine type of feeds that other vendors would be providing. We're really looking at the machine-to-human is the way I categorize it. All the events we correlate together and we categorize everything by actor, target, effect, or practice. Those 4 core categories. So who's doing it, who was the target, what effect did it have, and what practice they used to achieve their goal, okay? So what we're doing is we're trying to give the SOC as well as the C-suite type decision makers from a risk perspective a view of what's going on out in the world, what's going on in their industry, in specifics, who's getting hit, how is it happening, what's out there that they need to pretty much review your internal countermeasures, right? And that should generate questions and concerns internally to go to your SOC and say, hey, these banks, say financial, these banks have been getting hit by this specific attack type, by this specific actor, and I'm seeing it trend up, so they're making the rounds in our industry. Are we well positioned for that, right? What countermeasures do we have in our house, and what's our data telling us so that we can give ourselves a leg up, right? That's really what it boils down to, what we're trying to solve. So I've built several cybersecurity programs from the ground up. SOCs are a part of that. There's a lot of other things in SOC operations I had to worry about, but I really benefit from that type of situational awareness. Not everything's bits and bytes. It's really, hey, I need to know what my peers are getting hit with. I need to know what my competitors are being hit with. I need to know, do I go to the C-suite business units and say, are we well positioned from a cybersecurity standpoint? And the SOCs are viewing this information as well to do their own due diligence. So that's really, really the core use case for how
Okay, so I'll dig a little bit deeper. I have an analogy about the C-suite and CISOs in particular, and some folks have heard me use it in the past. You've got Thanksgiving meal or Christmas meal, insert holiday, and you've got the adults table, and that's the C-suite, the real C-suite. And a lot of times the security leader is at the kids' table rubbing mashed potatoes all over his face. And not with the big kid conversation. There's a certain level of maturity that's required. So my question for you is, how mature does or would you argue that you don't have to have a certain level of maturity to be able to move to that level of conversation? As I was saying in my presentation, right, we start off very indicator focused. We're down at the lower end of the pyramid. you guys are a higher level there.
We're at the higher level. So we take the, I use the term technodork, right? So we take the technodork out of the language and we're categorizing, right? A lot of, regardless of your technical background, you understand actor, target, effect, and practice. And we're telling you how much it's hitting and how much it's putting harm on your industry that will help you translate to the higher level conversations. We also have some capabilities where we put some program management type of things in there where we will map what data is happening out there to your budget line item, right? So you can actually use the tool to create your spend plan. You can see if you're over allocated in one threat area and under allocated in another threat area. In my experience, right, having to do a lot of relationship building with other business unit leaders, you really have to articulate how you're kind of helping them at the end of the day. They always viewed the security as a cost center. It's not a capability, it was a cost to them. You were a budget line item that was eating up too much of their budget and they're not seeing a lot of the return. They didn't understand the language. So I think a lot of times it will help you elevate up to the kiddie, away from the kiddie table, and translate that. It really, really will. If you get out of the low-level data. SOC should be looking at the low-level data and passing it up.
So if you look at of course I know you guys are a startup, but your existing customer base if we went back to my 1% or 10% or 90%, are your key customers those that are more mature, have a certain level of maturity in their overall threat intelligence program? Where do you fit in from that maturation spot?
A lot of our current customers are really in the build phase. I think the consumer goods, healthcare, financial type of sectors, they've been in the news quite a bit, right? And they don't want to be in the news themselves. And so we're helping them define internally, are they well positioned, right? Is their spend really, really boiling into some type of capability that they can really drive home internally? So a lot of that's in build phase. It's not super mature SOCs. It might be a loose SOC, right? It's just a couple people in a room that kind of are watching all their SIM, their IDS, or endpoint, whatever they got going, trying to keep up with the log deluge and really just chasing alarms. We're trying to give them that external view. So instead of shotgunning everything, you're laser beaming it, right? So I know specifically what resources from a people, process, or technology standpoint do I need to apply to a certain area.
Okay. We're going to dig back at that question in a little bit, but I want to make sure we don't forget my original question before I kind of started going down. So Mark,
Sure.
Top 2 use cases for you, and I know you did a lunch and learn, so I think that one was packed. But for those that didn't go to the
Sure.
lunch and learn, what are the top 2 use cases that you could help these guys out with?
Sure, definitely. And I'll preface this by saying that I'm always uncovering new use cases. It's actually fascinating to me sometimes when I go into somebody and they're like, well, this is what we're trying to use DomainTools for. And I'm like, really? I had no idea it would even do that. And I've been doing it, of course, for some time. So I'll distill down those 2 use cases, I think, kind of alluding to what you said before there, based on whether they're in kind of the 1% or the other percentage there. So folks that are, oftentimes when they're very first encountering a threat, it's around a domain or an IP address, they simply need to get some context for it. That's all they're doing is they just need context. And so they're going to go and they're going to do a whois lookup right now. If you're trying to automate your entire process and you're like, oh goodness, it's got to be more sophisticated than that, at some level that's what's really happening. So they need an authoritative source to do that. They need some place that they can trust as to where their queries are going, and they choose DomainTools for that. They also choose us because of the context we put around there. We help them easily see what other things that domain is connected with. If it's privacy protected, we've got 9 billion whois records, and chances are somewhere in that history is the attribution they might be needing. Or we can simply glue those records together and help them make correlations among those domains. We can help them get to those places very quickly, help them ascribe the right level of risk to that domain or IP it is that they're looking at. I would say the other really interesting use case comes for, and I guess right now I am seeing this predominantly around the 1%, but also starting to trickle down even to the 10% level, people that are wanting to do that same sort of a thing at scale. So they're saying that, yeah, these sort of, having an analyst take a look at domains that are showing up on a blacklist and maybe adding those to a firewall, that's sort of interesting. Having them look at some really bad ones and maybe look at some others that are connected, that's kind of cool. Can we just do that for like all the domains? So they're saying, what if we were to take every domain that's coming on a blacklist, expand that out to all the other domains that are related by, say, the same registrant information, and then just block all of them. And oh, by the way, let's also look for any new registrations around those, and let's block those proactively as well. So it gets toward that automation goal that I think a lot of people have. And they are looking to our data and our systems to be able to provide that for them at scale, to sort of take the analytical pathways that have proven to be very effective for them as a single analyst on the keyboard, and now then moving that into something that they do largely at scale.
Are you guys primarily B2C, or do you do partnerships with other security vendors or security vendors in the space?
Sure, good question. We are B to very C in some cases. Certainly the roots of DomainTools started out with people just doing a Google search for a domain name, and they would end up coming to our site because Google felt that we had a really good meta information about that. So from the perspective of just everyday consumers, certainly. We have, of course, especially in the last couple of years, a growing number of customers that are, I guess, the more professional consumers, more enterprise consumers. And then, yes, we are also integrated with a number of various partners, of which there is one, that ThreatConnect, that allows us to speak about that one publicly, for which we're very grateful, thank you. So yes, there's a growing number of integrations where partners have said, their customers, I guess, are really asking for more context around certain aspects of information maybe within their portal, even in some cases within their SIM, and as a way to try and respond to that, then they're looking to us to provide that context, that enrichment, and that expansion, and in some cases an ongoing monitoring as well.
Okay. All right, so next question is, you guys feel like you have a good idea for what they do? Okay, go ahead.
Can we just use a one-word thing? So ThreatConnect, you are a repository?
An analytic platform to make sense of threat
People
intelligence.
put their own data in there? Or
Yeah,
you provide-
that's correct.
People put their own data in there as an analytic platform?
Yes.
And emerging threats, you're actually a feed and then an enhancement to that data in a portal form.
Originator and context, yeah.
Okay. And you're kind of a vertical threat intelligence kind of information for the higher level executives.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep. We're really looking at the risk of the analytics, right? So we do collect quite a copious amount of data. We run it through analytics, and we come out with a result that's more strategic in view, not so much tactical from an instant response or indicator or compromise type of context. It's very strategic. It's looking at the actor, target, effects, and practices within your given industry, however you build your profile.
And then you're an enhancement to, a person has their own data, you're an enhancement to it.
I'd say that closer to the repository that you mentioned before is predominantly what's powering a lot of our products, and then increasingly becoming a platform on which to launch intelligence investigations around domains.
I'm just going to make a quick joke. Every vendor has a platform.
Absolutely.
I was talking about getting beat down by similar things you hear all the time. Everybody's got a platform, so you got to have a platform, I guess. But I'm sorry, I'm just taking a quick stab at vendor. That goes back to my Fusion and my little drinking game stuff.
The
right?
problem is we can't say anything back because he has the next question on his cheat sheet.
No, you can fire
Right.
back at me too.
That's right.
You could say, hey, other analyst firm guys ask way better questions than you do. So, however you want. Sorry, I don't know if that did you get all your questions? Did that summary help?
I think that helps. So really there's only two of you who are sort of kind of competitors.
You mean DomainTools and us?
Kind of, sort of?
No, we actually use DomainTools to enrich all the data that our customers put in the platform. So this is confusing stuff, and I think
Yeah.
Rick
It's part of
highlighted
the
this earlier.
conversation,
Threat intelligence means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. All the products are going to say that it's what they do. The reality is, I can try to simplify it down to it's making better decisions about what you should do in your organization, whether that be tactical or strategic. And there's going to be data from various sources that you can use in that. There's going to be various technologies like DomainTools that gets more information about something. So to rebuttal your platform mistake, I think that the term platform is very indicative of integrating the best of the technologies that you as practitioners need to make decisions. So whether that be Farsight, pulling in data, or DomainTools, or someone else, you have to figure out what kind of decisions you want to make, and then the platform is responsible for gluing it all together and allowing your people to be more productive in that process. So it's not easy, and it changes based on who you talk to.
Providing like indicator level kind of data with emerging is that true?
But we have synergy and fusion in the cloud with all of us.
Right. That's right. Very nice.
How many drinks do I get for that?
That's a
Nice.
good one. That's actually something else that I use in Analyst to try to understand someone. Maybe could you run through your top? And, okay, this is something else that bugs me as an analyst. I'll ask someone who their competitors are, and a vendor will say we don't have any competitors. Which everybody has direct competitors, but also everyone is competing for budget. So if it's helpful for the room too, maybe mention your top 2 competitors in your space. Although I know some of you do multiple things, but top 2 competitors you see coming up in deals.
So on the less mature side, it's definitely ThreatStream with feed aggregation. On the analytics side, it's home built. It's many of you guys in the Fortune 500 that have built a elk-backed data analytic platform. Alex has a lot of good war stories in that area. So on one side, it's build, and the other side, it's the feed play, which is.
Did you take a shot?
I think I did.
I think you took a shot. Okay.
So.
On the Intel side, probably Norse, IID, folks like that, although half of us are partners as well in that space. On the rule side, SourceFire, which is now Cisco, and thankfully pulling them out of the limelight for us, which is nice.
It's a tough one because we don't really deal with the low level stuff with the signature level type of stuff. So maybe a little bit of eyesight partners, a little bit of ThreatStream. I think there's no carbon copy, I would say, competitor.
Because I was talking to Jason, one of your founders, last week. I asked the same question, and I said, "What about BitSight?"
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I think so. It's one of those things where I don't think there's a 100% true carbon copy competitor. There's a lot of different vendors that do a lot of things, have a similar look and feel in pockets. But it's not all brought together.
And on the DomainTools side?
Sure. So,
And no
if
trolling for me, because now you guys are going to start throwing out more stuff like you
Right.
just did, or I don't have any competitors.
That's right. That's right. So I guess predominantly, so that certainly there's this sort of naive sense that I can just go and get whois data because it's just out there, which is not a big deal. I can just go ahead and make a whois query, and I'm there, and that's great. Go try to do about 101 of those, and then come back and let's have that conversation. So there's some difficulty around that. But certainly, if you're just starting small scale, that works. And there are larger databases of whois data. Whois XML API is one of them. Certainly, our data extends way beyond just whois data. And we've also had customers that, and this is absolutely a true story, we've had customers who have tried our competitive products and come back to us and said, yeah, that didn't work out so well, so we need to restart this conversation, which made the pricing discussion a whole lot of fun, by the way. So I think there's that part of it. To my knowledge, right now, nobody has aggregated as much data as we have in the same place. Nobody is collecting it at the scale that we're collecting at, and nobody is archiving it and presenting it at the scale at which we are.
Okay, so follow-up question, which you may not want to answer. Sometimes vendors are cagey about it. Talk to me about an average customer size and what that cost is. Like a list price for an average, I want an average deal size for a customer. Because we have a number of different capabilities here. Just throw it out, list price like you would on a website or something like that. These are prospects, and they just want to know if you're 800 grand, 20 grand, 100 grand.
Now I know why people dropped out of this panel.
Yes, no kidding.
All right, I'll go first since I like to be put on the spot. All right, so going back to my initial comment of, I think that there's a lot of sophisticated threat intelligence know-how in this room, but I like to think threat intelligence is for everyone, not just for the people that work in the IC. And so on the one end of the spectrum, I think many of you have ThreatConnect accounts. It's free. There's data in there that didn't come from my company, but it came from your peers. Many of you in Fortune 500 companies are partaking in communities within ThreatConnect today, sharing data with each other, also free. All of what ThreatConnect does is for the good of cyber defense. We do whatever we can to provide that at a low cost or at a free level because we want to give back. However, People always ask how we make money, and the way we make money is we sell to the Fortune 500. Our prices range from $45K on the public cloud to $500,000 plus on the on-prem.
So you have an on-prem solution?
We do.
Just wanted to clarify that. I get a lot, just for me, competitors placing you only in the cloud. So.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. I'm just looking for orders of magnitude to help you guys, because I have a follow-up question after this, after we work through this. But that one I already told you what that one is. So there's been 4 that you didn't know about and 1 that you did. So all right,
ratio.
so working down, just rough order of magnitude on cost.
For excuse me, for rule sets, IDS side, $500 a sensor a year, and discounted, of course. On intelligence, $2,000 or $3,000 a year to tens of thousands a year, depending on use.
Okay.
But we have our open community rule set as well. So we're open source hippies at heart.
So our license structure, it's not really on-prem, it's all cloud-based. So it's user account based. It all depends on how many users you want to have, and it's tiered, obviously. The more you buy, the more
Is that number of seats that access the portal, or is that number of employees in a company?
user accounts, right? It's a login
Okay.
credential, right? So it's however many accounts you have, which is going to be dictated by your user base and your, obviously your organizational size and how distributed they are. So it's tiered that way, and obviously the more accounts you have, the more value pricing there would be that you would expect from a higher level. It usually starts about 10 grand and rolls up,
Okay.
depending on quantity.
So most of our customers really do range in size. If they're just using the web portal and they're just interacting with there, most of them, depending on what their needs are, maybe 10, 15K, maybe less. Kind of really depends on what their level of sophistication is and how much they beg. So there's that. Then on the upper end, we have people that are consuming our data at scale. And that's starting to get somewhere into 6 figures. And if that's scary to you, that's actually kind of an interesting discussion. We've had some customers that are initially horrified at that level, like, oh my gosh, it's just a who is database, what on earth? And then they come back to me 6-9 months later, and they're like, okay, we understand the problems we're trying to solve now, and we're ready. We're ready to go at that level. And but you know what? If you just want the API and you want to start out with it, just let me know, and I'll find a way to kind of get you into it for a whole lot less than that.
So my follow-up, I'm just trying to help you guys understand a lot of different go-to-market and stuff like that. My follow-up question, because I know this is the case for some folks here, we're just now standing up a CTI program. We're bringing in staff. I have very limited budget for 2015. Which one of you do I invest in first? And this one they knew about in advance. So, well, an email was sent. So if you send an email to me, it doesn't mean I read it. That may not be the case for them.
What email?
So we'll just work our way down. No, let's work. No,
Sure.
work from this Adam side and work down.
So let me think of how to say this without sounding selfish. When you start any part of your business, what are the first things you do? You understand your requirements, right? And I think this is no different. A threat intelligence program starts with understanding the needs of the customers that you're going to service within your organization. First and foremost, what their requirements are to get their job done. Then you need to look at how to technically support that and then build the processes around that. So I know you hate the word, but platform is important here.
So what you're saying is you.
Me. That's why you started. So when you think about it, any other part of your business, when you're going to make an investment in people, you make an investment in technology first because you want to make those people more productive. And the last thing you want is
technology before people?
Technology before people, yes. You need process before technology, but then you need people after you have the right foundation laid. So you don't hire a pilot to fly an airplane until you own an airplane. So you need to look at the trajectory that you're going to need to support the people you're going to hire, because hiring them and handing them a spreadsheet is going to waste a lot of their time. And so I would say that ThreatConnect comes first because it's the platform that you're going to use to make those people productive on their first day of employment while they're waiting for their sensitivity training and the other things that they have to do to get started in your workplace.
I want my people first. People before technology was in my hierarchy of needs too,
Well,
but
it depends on what people you're talking about.
But
So-
I do agree, there's a certain skill set, and there's certain things there. And probably most organizations aren't, some of them, they already have some existing staff. They may be complemented, they may be repurposing IR guys. So in all cases, it's not always a complete net new scenario, so, okay.
I would say if you don't have IDS infrastructure first, go there, whether it's our rules or someone else. And then past that, we're in a good complement for folks using our rule sets on Suricata or Snort because our the context you're going to get around the reputation data is related to those signatures as well. And the signatures also tell you IPs and domains related to those. So that's a good fix for us, or a fit of our data together if that's all you're going to use. If you're going to use multiple feed platforms or multiple data feeds, then you definitely need a tip, as I guess that's the term that's coming up for y'all now. So yeah, definitely the basics first, IDS firewalls, SIMs, log correlation. Then pick the data feed that's going to be best fit the tools that you have. And ours fits most, but not all. And if you're multiple feeds, of course, you need to step up, use a platform to aggregate them and push to your stuff.
Okay.
But still buy ours.
Adam?
So I'm going to put my CISO kind of hat on, just kind of exactly, this is no BS how I think when I built my programs. Is I look at things, how much capability do I get per dollar spent, right? I got to be a good steward of the budget. I got to squeeze beer out of the turnip, right, because you don't get a whole lot. And I really want to look at what my capability gaps are. And everybody's going to be different, right? You're always going to have, to your point, if your behavioral and signature-based environment in your core network isn't squared away. If your endpoints aren't squared away. If your user, your authentication, identity management, access control is squared away, square that away. And when you square that away and you've gotten to that top 20 controls kind of environment, you know what normal looks like. So you're now starting to wonder, well, what does abnormal look like? Then you're going to start investing in these other tools. Obviously, I'm going to lean towards my tool because there's no back-end hidden costs either, right? For a cloud-based, you turn on the account, you got the data. All right, you have the data. You know, I can't tell you, I bet there's people who will relate to this, how many times I bought a tool, it was bundled in a Cadillac-only version. Next thing you know, I got to hire a half work year, a full work year of integration. I got professional service on hosting environment. Next thing you know, I got $500,000 in, and I'm not even at full operational capability. I haven't even made a decision off of anything yet, right? I'm just trying to get it there. And everybody's asking me, why is it spend, blah, 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 blah. So does that sound familiar, right? So been there, done that 100 times. That's why we designed ours cloud-based. You turn it on, it's on. It is an API. So if in the future we're looking to work with like the ARC sites out there to say, hey, just point the API, you can render it within your own environment. So that's kind of where I deal with. We're also looking to try and help you define what's well positioned. What's the rest of the world look like, right? From a capability standpoint, where are you light, where are you heavy, and then where you got to spend, reprogram that budget. And we provide that for a low cost, right? And behind that, I mentioned this. I have like a small ISAC team. So you get risk reports, you get alerts. We're juiced in with a lot of different organizations. So every couple days you get alerts from us, say, hey, pay attention to this because it's hurting other people. Go to your SOC and ask them, hey, I see we're seeing this out in the world. Are we well positioned? If you see a SurfWatch kind of alert says, hey, this domain's really doing a lot of stuff. Obviously, there's other providers of that. I would be turning my SOC and saying, is this stuff on the blacklist? Because other people in our industry are really getting hit hard with this. Ransomware is hitting this variant of crypto wall has been hitting this industry, and that's our industry. They're really targeting these type of people. How are we positioned for this variant, right? And I think it's coming across Tor now. So it's like, hey, are we blocking Tor? Do we need Tor? Obviously, we shouldn't have to have Tor in the banking industry or anything like that. So is it blocked? Which is mitigate the threat that way. And it should be pushing that conversation to your SOC. Absolutely.
So I had somebody recently tell me, and this is a direct quote, they had come from another organization, and they were coming into a company that was spinning up their threat intel capacity. Part of that was hiring them in to kind of lead that effort, to kind of shepherd the things, make the right decisions. And that person told me really kind of unsolicited. They said that in their opinion, if you wanted to do threat intelligence properly, you needed to have domain tools as part of what you were doing. And that is, it's something that I don't selectively choose that quote. That's something that we hear often. We had some people tell us one time that all they really needed was malware signatures, passive DNS, and domain tools, and they could rule the world. And based on the place that they were working at the time, I could totally see that. So I think the reality is that at some point early on in your threat intelligence maturity cycle, you're going to encounter domains, and you're going to some extent encounter IP addresses, and you're going to be perplexed. You're going to wonder, what do I do now to try and go from here? And because they're going to show up in so many different places, you really do need something to try and give you the context on it. Now, if you happen to look at it and you're like, you know what, we're in the 99%, right? We're so just really getting going on this, and I'm getting this data out of DomainTools, but I really have absolutely no idea what to do with it. If that's where you're at right now in the capability, then look at something like a platform, such as ThreatConnect, that you're going to get the benefit of DomainTools in there, and you're also going to get a context in which to put that information. And then later on, as some of our customers have, you may decide, you know what, I want to start doing some of this more hands-on investigation myself, in which case, thank you very much. I'm going to take DomainTools. I'm going to keep my platform going at the same time, and I'm going to work these two things in parallel, and then eventually end up scaling up to something a little bit larger.
Okay. All right, I think we've got, 20 minutes left or so. We'll see if there's any questions from the audience. Yeah, we already got a good enough hands, so.
Not Pixie.
All right, so I took my shots.
Please
Now it's
not
the
Pixie.
audience's turn. Was it Paul?
No, it's
A lot of what we call threat intelligence right now really is shared situational awareness. Somebody has to be hit first, and then that information is shared. What do we need to do collectively to get to the point where we're actually in the predictive business? This is where they're going to hit next. This is what it's going to look like, and how do we push that to our perimeter so we can defend against it before the attack actually hits anybody?
I'd say,
That's
yeah,
a great question.
we've been, I mean, the predictive, I think, depends on the size of data set and how much context around the data set. We experiment with that. For the 80%, we can predict. We know these bulletproof nets, these bulletproof colos. We know they're going to be bad for a long time. So predicting that 80% is fine. The other 20%, of course, is always the problem. Anybody can pick up an IP that's been clean forever, a new domain registered with a clean domain that's never been used for anything else before, and put it on a name server that's brand new as well, never been used for anything else. We can't predict if that's good or bad until we see activity. So predictive, pretty much a home run for 80%. For the really important stuff, I don't know that we can. It's got to be activity observation based.
I think that feeds into detection and response. If you can eliminate 80% of the noise, then that last 20% that we can't predict, we can't prevent, we can use our limited resources to do the detection and response upon it.
I think that's definitely some of it. I think, too, for us, what we've seen some of our largest and most sophisticated customers doing is saying that when they get in information about, say, a particular domain name as being bad, shows up on a blacklist, or maybe they observe itself doing something bad, they're going to go into DomainTools, they're going to expand out to see what other domains are related by some of the attributes that you described before there: shared name server, shared IP address, shared ownership information, and then they're going to use that resultant list of domains that they've now expanded their perspective in to respond proactively. They may block those, they may start looking for any new domains that are registered by the same people. It's a very effective and interesting tactic, especially if you kind of have large-scale access to the data. One of the things that we've been working on is finding ways of taking that same sort of guilt by association concept and pulling it into a way in which we can provide it as either an on-demand or as a feed sort of model. So kind of a reputation-based concept, to where we start saying, you know what, at some certain point, when this email address is used on like 5 known domains that are bad, let's just assume the other 14 are also bad. And let's also do the same thing with, at certain thresholds, with IP addresses, with name servers and name server IP addresses. And we're going to allow that to trickle down and propagate to those. And in so doing, what we'll do is we'll provide to many people a kind of a package solution to the kinds of things that very large-scale enterprises are already doing, large-scale incident response companies as well are doing with DomainTools at scale. I think that correlation is definitely, there's a lot of promise in that. And our early testing and early statistics on that have borne that out to be very true and very useful and relevant. And I think that it remains a relevant and an interesting and powerful vector that we probably could be utilizing a lot more commonly than what we are today.
So we talked briefly about technology versus people, and I think we all agree that people need to be somewhere in the process. So with each of your services or products, what specific skill sets and ideally how many personnel should a company have in order to take the best advantage of what you guys have to offer?
Good question.
So I'll start, since I don't know if I said it correctly last time, is people are critical. They're the ones that create the process in the first place. It's only after they create the process and the requirements do you actually know what the platform should do. I'm a firm believer in that threat intelligence doesn't need to be very sophisticated. It can be as simple as tying together an incident responder with DomainTools, with 3 feeds, and helping that incident responder do the job of an analyst. However, I will say that most of our customers today are Fortune 500. Most of them have just hired 2, 3, 10 people out of the IC, and they are just building an Intel program. My hope is that that's not the norm, and that you people are the more sophisticated threat intel practitioners, but threat intel can be for the masses.
So for SurfWatch, just to answer your question also, I think we've positioned our data in a way that I think both the developers, the engineers, the analysts in the SOC, as well as somebody who's not from that technical realm, can both consume the same data, right? Because it's presented from a risk management type of standpoint, but you're also able to drill down into some details if you need that, right? And then they can look at their other tools, right? Because everybody has multiple tools on a toolbox, right? You buy a tool to answer a specific question, and so I think to answer your question, it's a good translator, right? It's a very good translator to get in the same kind of terminology, looking at the same categories of data, but for different uses and different decision making, right? Because the SOC's going to be looking at it from a tactical reason, the C-suite's going to be looking at it from a strategic standpoint.
I think it also depends on if you're an organization that just detect and re-image whack-a-mole, or do you have to detect, seize, gather evidence, find the actor, find what was disclosed, find what was compromised. You have regulatory constraints about that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're just the detect, re-image, whack-a-mole, that's far fewer people than the other situation.
And I think for us, certainly I'll echo what Adam said there. I do have some people that are, it's really just 1 or 2 analysts. One of them has gone crazy with Maltego, and they've wired it up to DomainTools, and my goodness, the magic that they can do. And they're off and running, and they're productive and effective on that. I've got other ones that are teams of 5, 6, 7. I have entire incident response companies. So it really does depend on kind of what level they are. I think there's a significant benefit to be had across the spectrum. I would encourage at least a few people that can have a little bit of development chops, some familiarity with Python, because at some point you are going to probably want to write a for loop, and you're going to want to do some analysis on some of this stuff. And a lot of us up here, we've got APIs that help with that. And you'd be surprised how if you have just 1 or 2 people in there with a little bit of scripting knowledge, they'll be able to look at, and they'll take very much the approach that Adam was talking about before, where they're like, okay, this is tedious. I'm going to go and automate this for the team. And your whole team begins to benefit from that. Or sometimes they will locate places within the process where, as an analyst, it could be expensive to pursue a certain line of research, maybe connections by IP addresses or name servers, both of which can be a little more tenuous. But a good coder can reduce the cost of pursuing those lines of research and increase your chances of yielding something useful from it. So very useful to kind of have somebody on there that can do that as well.
Let me ask a quick question for the room, just real quick. How many people have development coding skills in their teams?
Great.
So that's encouraging.
It
For
is.
this audience, I would expect it to kind of go back to Adam's point, kind of threat intelligence for all. Majority of my clients that I work with, they don't have those capabilities. They're going to have to rely on third parties. So vendors do need to try to come up with force
Indeed.
multipliers. Let me take a shot for my own little military buzzword there, but force multipliers for that lower skill set. Paul?
So I want to challenge all of you on the answer that you gave to the hard question of which one should be first. Because you all gave wrong answers, and then you all agreed on a right answer. And I want to put additional sort of hair on this. So The couple things that you do not want to do, if you are in the position that you said in the question, you're building up this team and you're trying to figure out what to do first, do not buy the airplane before you select your pilot. I have over and over again been contacted by people who say, my C-suite was just hard sold out on the golf course by some other C-suite networked person, an airplane that is not going to do the right thing, so I'm now looking. What you really want to do is what Rick said, get the people first and make them make this decision, because you don't hire a craftsman and then tell them exactly what tools you want them to use. You're hiring them to get a job done. Part of that job is to determine what tools to use. Another thing that you should not try and do, if you're in the position Rick said, is try to secure an existing infrastructure. There has never been a case any time in recorded human history that sprinkling security pixie dust on an existing construction somehow made it secure. If you didn't build it with an IDS first, if you didn't build the IDS and the honeypot first and then build your infrastructure around that, you did it wrong and you have to start over. Budget for that.
Well, as a counterpoint to that, though, everyone would agree with that, but the reality of us starting
There's
over,
no budget for that.
it just won't happen.
Well,
There's no
okay,
budget.
so we
But when you have a data center consolidation
No,
or things
okay.
like that, you have some opportunities to re-engineer.
Thank you for making me clarify that. You can't always do exactly what you should do, but you can have a certain shining city on the hill that you're moving toward whenever you get an opportunity. So
Yeah.
we have all been in the position of having to rebuild the airplane in flight. That's what you're going to have to do, but you have to own that. You have to admit that to yourself and say, by the way, that's something that I need to be realistic about. The same way you would be realistic about DNSSEC or IPv6. It's not what you're going to do this week, but it is something you have to do. Anyway, the two things you should do are take any of these guys, because I know all of them. Some of them are already existing partners of my company, but I know that they know each other. If you pick one, they're going to either solve the problems you have or help cross-sell, resale, or integrate solutions that other people on this panel have. So what you need is a partner who respects your autonomy and wants you to be strong, and these guys are those guys. You should certainly stay away from black box solutions. If a Big Four consulting firm says they can solve the problem for you with a single purchase order, then back away slowly. But anyway, I did want to say none of these guys is the right thing to start with. You need to start with an investigation of, you need to get your people and let them decide what to do first. They're going to end up with all of the solutions represented on this panel integrated into the final solution, which will last about a month until it is time to rethink it again. Because the bad guys are waiting for you to settle on a solution so that they can begin building the way around it. So anyway, thank you for that.
I can certainly see that, and I one of the things that, so yes, you do need people that can do this, and I bump into conversations with people sometimes who they're like, you know, we think we want to do this, we think we want to do domain tools, and what's DNS again? I'm confused. And I'm like, oh dear, okay, this is going to be a tough conversation. But actually, I often have that conversation in this city with some acronyms of various sizes that will remain unnamed. But they are good people trying to investigate badness on the internet. They are trying to protect their networks. They are relatively smart. They have perhaps not quite the same investigative mindset that a Krebs does, but something approximating that. And what I've been absolutely fascinated by is how just a couple hours of some internet fundamental training will really help to start kind of launch them off into that direction. And that's one thing that I've started doing. I've tried the whole, I'll teach you how to do domain tools thing as being like the first time I'm talking with a group. And there's some people here who maybe have had that inflicted on them. And I can see people looking in the group and they're just kind of, their eyes are glazing over. And I've tried to solve that by bringing coffee to the meetings. But failing that, I've often, in some cases, taken a step back and said, you know what, let's just talk about this thing called the internet. It's not just a series of tubes, right? There's more on the internet than just pictures of cats. And we need to talk about the ways that this is glued together. But without too much effort, you can start to get people to that level of kind of baseline competency. And then from there, they can find our tool useful and practical. And I think that that same thing may apply to some extent with other platforms. I love that word now. I just have to try and throw it out there every time. Because a lot of platforms come with an ideology. They come with a concept. They come with a methodology that they believe is the way in which to do threat intelligence and threat investigation appropriately and responsively. And if that company is doing their job well, then they're going to train that. They're going to train you while using their product. They're going to train you around that mindset. So in many cases, you can select your vendor based on that mindset and then decide from there if that's kind of what you want to have replicated within your team.
Anyone else want to respond to Paul?
I would say I wholly agree with Paul, which is generally a good idea because he's generally right. Starting with the team, if you can build a team that's very strong on open source tools and has relationships, they're going to be able to do far better than buying commercial suites for millions up front. If you can't get that, if you get a team that ends up being strong managers and strong programmers, there's a different set of tools that they're going to be most effective with. I imagine that was the point Paul was going toward, and I wholly agree.
But have a plan before you hire all the people. Because if your plan changes after you have 15 full-timers and an integrator and a big consulting firm, then you've made your decision too late. So you have to figure out what you're trying to do. Have enough people as part of that core team, right? We're not necessarily hiring 100 pilots until we have 100 airplanes, right? So I think that plan. I'll repeat something that Mark said. The level of sophistication right now is frightening in the industry. People want threat intelligence. They're not sure what it is yet. So now that you're all educated, go out and teach.
Yes.
Can I respond?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul. And then we'll take one more question after that.
I was just going to add to Paul.
Oh, go ahead.
Then go ahead.
Sure. I just want to mention that, I just want to bring up our company and the problem that we ran into is how do you convince people to spend money on what they don't know? And so we've looked into this, and to touch on what you were saying is we looked into a quantitative risk assessment, a financial value at risk, where we could, you can go in there, profile assets, threats, the network itself, based upon the security framework, 20 critical security controls, where it's a mitigation and planning product that would put a predictive number together for the C-level executives so that they know where to spend their money, where to make their wise investments, and not base it upon fear, but on finances.
Totally agree.
Did you base that on incidents going back some amount of time?
It's not our product, but it was done by some security researchers, similar to what the Wall Street financial models that are. It's predictive analysis, and it gives them some sort of number of what they're at risk of losing over X amount of months.
Yeah, so you can talk to the executives in a way they understand, which
absolutely, and then
company is money.
And based upon the 20 critical security controls, which mitigation techniques you can actually put in place to buy down the most amount of risk, so you can know which products to actually go with.
So I think we have time for one. Paul, you want to close this out?
Yes, I think I do. Shutting off my mic is certainly one way to shut me up.
And he's still speaking tomorrow too, folks.
Okay, so I think that was the best answer that I heard to the question that you posed to the panel, was what was just said, but I wanted to answer Adam. I'm not arguing for hiring 100 pilots before you pick your airplane. There is kind of a spiral theory to this, where you begin with a leadership team whose job is to discover the art of the possible, and out of that you get a company strategy, and out of that you get a longer-term plan. And the only thing that differs in the answers I heard versus what I would have liked to hear is that this is your going-in position. And you are a moving target, and as you zigzag across the sky, the bad guys are going to build new weapons to catch any pattern you show them. And so there's this tendency to believe that because you know what your prospective losses are, you have some rough order of magnitude on the upper bound of what you'd be willing to spend to avoid those losses, and that you can simply budget for that and this becomes a solved problem, and that's not true. These are threats that are coming at us not just from criminals in our own country, but other governments and criminals in other countries. And these are, before the internet, these are the types of threats that our federal police would have been able to protect us from. And now we're all out there living in this Wild West scenario where everybody has to go armed when they're on the internet. And this is a forever problem. The bad guys are going to continue to match their strength to our strength. And so the only thing I'd say is you will end up with 100 pilots. And be ready for that. If you're not willing to commit to that, then just learn to live with the losses you have and stop spending any management bandwidth at all on this. There's a serious approach to this, and I recommend it. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to the panelists, and thank you all for the questions. Good job, guys. Expo time. Be back at 20 after.